in general, I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan for this reason. He models what it is to be a person who asks questions and inquires and does it in as unbiased a way as possible. He's not perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but he tries. He really tries. But he gets it wrong sometimes. And he had a catastrophic fail just a couple of days ago, and I got to call him on it. He had this guy named Colin Hughes on his program. And I guess what we'll do is we'll just listen to the conversation between him and Colin Hughes. And then I'm going to reveal what an absolute scammer this guy is and how Rogan inadvertently, um, you know, screwed up by being too open-minded. You don't want to be perennially open-minded. At a certain point, you have to use your intelligence and say, "Hey, this is a scam. This is crap. I'm not going there." But see, Rogan's got tens of millions of listeners. So let's put it this way, and you'll see, and we'll bring this up at the end. Believe me, the people at the IDF and Zionist Israeli Genocide Central were high-fiving after this show.
One point where you were kind of saying it's almost as if the Jews are doing what was done to them,
Well,
as if it's genocide.
I'm saying that when you're killing 30,000 innocent civilians in response to something that killed 1,200 innocent civilians, and you're continuing to bomb an area into oblivion, which is what it looks like when you're looking at Gaza. There's many people that have made the argument that that is at least the steps of genocide or a form of genocide. You're destroying thousands and thousands of people's homes and killing them.
So when you say 30,000 civilians, it's not 30,000 civilians that have been killed, though.
How many thousands have been killed?
So according to Gaza Health Ministry, which it is run by Hamas, the number they have is 32,000, but they don't distinguish between Hamas and civilians.
How many members of Hamas are there?
40,000, something like that. I don't think the number is known, but it's tens of thousands. So Hamas says 32,000 people have been killed, civilians and soldiers. Israel says 13,000 soldiers have been killed by Israel. So if you let's not doubt either number. They could both be inflated. But if both of those numbers are accurate, which they may or may not be, that would be 13,000 soldiers killed, 19,000 civilians killed, which for urban combat in the Middle East is a very normal ratio.
I see what you're saying if you wanted to look at it cold and objectively. Yeah. But
I hope it doesn't come across cold because...
But it's mostly women and children that are dying, that are dying because they're in a place where these terrorists are, right? I mean, it's not...
Because the terrorists on purpose embed themselves with the civilian population, which is a war crime.
Right, which is a strategy that they have clearly employed when you see them. And when the IDF went into that hospital and found Hamas...
Just recently?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's real. It's not just a conspiracy theory. We know that that's real. But you're still talking about 20,000, whatever it is, of innocent people getting bombed into the Stone Age. So the accusation was that they were shooting people that were trying to get aid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you don't think that's the case?
I think it's very unlikely.
Is it possible?
Yeah, it's possible. Absolutely.
My
assumption is that there is going to be war crimes in this war.
Right.
Because, and I know Kurt would probably say I'm doing the tragedy of war thing, but it's actually a legitimate point in every single war, even the just ones. There are war crimes by berserk soldiers, by the good guys.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's genocide, and that doesn't mean it's not a just war.
All right, I misnamed this guy. I said Colin. His name's Coleman Hughes. And all right, who is this guy? Right? He knows so much. Right? So is he a combat veteran? Has he actually seen women and children blown to bits? Has he actually seen women crying over their dead children or children crying over their dead parents? No, he's not a combat veteran. Well, maybe he's a military guy, though, right? He's a veteran of some kind. No, never been in the military. All right. Not a combat veteran, not a veteran of any kind, but he's certainly well-read in military history. No, there's no evidence that he knows anything about military history at all. Okay, well, if he's not a combat veteran and he's not a military veteran, and he's not well read in military history. Certainly, he's someone that's been to law school or has done a very deep dive into international law, especially as it relates to war crimes and genocide, right? No, no background in that whatsoever. Well, if he's not a combat veteran, he's not a military veteran, and he's not well read in military history, and he's not well read in law, and he's not familiar and conversant with the laws related to genocide and war crimes and the Geneva Convention, then see what must he be knowledgeable about? Oh, he plays the trombone. I mean, I love musicians, and he plays the trombone. He's good enough to play in the Charles Mingus tribute band, so he's a good trombone player. Does that really qualify him to be giving his opinions here? All right, so he's not a combat veteran, he's not a military veteran, he's not a military historian, armchair or professional. He's not a legal scholar, armchair or professional. He doesn't seem to have any special knowledge of war crimes law or genocide law. So surely he read the South Africa government's complaint against Israel, which was issued in late December. It's almost how many months ago now? It's 3 months ago. We actually published it. Where's the book? Where's the cover? Um, we actually put it out in January in printed form. It's on Amazon for anyone who wants to read it. Uh, he's read that and he's completely conversant with it, right? No, no, not at all. Not at all. Let's remember, folks, there was a complete, detailed, with mountains of evidence, genocide complaint brought against Israel in early January 2024. We are now in approaching mid-April 2024. And this jackass, Coleman Hughes, who has no basis really to say anything other than what he's pulling out of his ass, is somehow granted the powerful platform of Joe Rogan to engage in a debate with Joe Rogan about is it or is it not genocide? Well, Coleman seems to know all the detail. He knows nothing. He knows absolutely nothing. I got to ask, is there one or more bookers on the Joe Rogan show who's in somebody's pocket? Because I guarantee Mr. Coleman just had a nice payday for himself, whether it's direct or indirect. Again, his training is in music, which is great. You can learn a lot learning to play music. His education, interestingly enough, comes from Columbia University, where he got a degree in something. He wrote a very important book, I think, which basically says you can't keep crying about racism every time somebody stubs their toe. Hey, I'm all with him in on that. But he happens to be a member, or excuse me, not a member. He is a sponsored intellect. So after he was brought to the Obama White House to be, what is it, a White House scholar or some U.S. presidential scholar, uh, he then ended up at Obama's old alma mater. Not that this means anything, Columbia University, where he graduated in philosophy. Good for him. He was born in 1996, which makes him all of 28. Forbes, he's on the Forbes, 30 under 30 people to watch, 30 people under 30 to watch. If you look at the list, Bankman-Fried, the great scam artist of Bitcoin, was on that list. I'm drawing a blank on the lady's name that she had the fake blood testing thing. I can't remember her name, but you know who she is, and she had all these people donate, contributing millions, billions, really, of dollars to her company, and it turned out to be a total fraud. She was on the Forbes 30 and under 30 people under 30 to watch. If you look at that list of the 30 under people to 30 under 30 to watch, they're not all bad, but it's amazing what a high percentage of them turn out to be really bad. They are typically creations of fraud. Okay, and this sounds like I'm coming down really hard on old Coleman Hughes here. But in fact I am, because he is a creation of something called the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research. Okay, what does that mean? Well, they give you a ton of money, but the money is not the important thing. They also give you some training, in how to present yourself, and some seasoning. What else did they do for you? They pave your way in the mainstream and other media. They make sure you get a big, juicy book contract. They make sure that your book is promoted very heavily. Now, these people happen to be conservatives, and they are certainly obviously in bed with Israel. And I guess somebody sat down with little Coleman and said, "Hey, Coleman, all that's the great stuff we do for you, the best-selling book that we, because they can make a best-selling book out of a roll of toilet paper." They've done that with the biography of Michelle Obama. I mean, that's a trick they play. They can take anything and make it a bestseller, and they do that frequently. So they probably sat him down and said, "Hey, Coleman, that bestseller you got, and all this media attention you got, and yeah, yeah, we love what you're doing, and hey, let's talk about Israel." And made sure his head was in the right place. And then somebody picked up a phone and talked to somebody on the Joe Rogan staff and said, "Hey, we'd really like you to have this fellow Coleman Hughes on to debate Joe on his." Do you see how crazy this is? To have this 28-year-old dude that doesn't know shit from Shinola about anything, engaging in a pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli, pro-genocide debate with Joe Rogan in front of, let's just say, 20 million viewers. That just happened a few days ago. So this, we're not talking about something that happened in October or November or December or January. We're April. We're April 2024. And Joe Rogan, somehow his people decided to put this jackass Coleman Hughes, this genocidal cover-up artist, on Joe Rogan to pose as the reasonable guy, in the genocide debate. That's how this world works. And I'm a huge fan of Joe Rogan. Believe me, when you're running an operation like he has, you got to count on and trust the people around you. And you can't always trust the people around you 100%, well, unless you're very scrupulous and careful. And he's always got the cool, sexy CIA agents coming on and talking about how cool the CIA is. Remember during COVID, he had that University of Minnesota professor on for, I don't know, 18 hours straight, talking about how COVID was going to kill us all. That was very early on in the COVID scam. You know, there was an opportunity to set that COVID thing right from day one. He could have been the guy that did it. He didn't do it. But anyway, Coleman Hughes, Columbia University grad, a creation of the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, conservative tool, a well-spoken person, a reasonable man, age 28, with no background on anything related to the topic at hand, gets to go on Joe Rogan and spew the pro-genocide, in a velvet glove. He's not actually specifically calling for the slaughter of women and children. He's just saying, hey, things like this happen and it's a-okay, because he's a military expert, and he's an international law expert. He's probably a good trombone player. You don't get to play in the Mingus tribute band unless you're pretty good. He plays every week at the Standard in New York City, by the way, if anyone wants to go by and catch that band. Um, Frustrating, huh? To see this. This is the guy we count on, Joe Rogan, and he got flim-flammed by this tool. And I like Coleman's book because it is true. You're not helping Black people, especially children, by reciting this endless litany of horrors. Okay, it's not the Jim Crow era anymore. It's not slavery anymore. Every ethnic group Irish can talk about the enforced famine in Ireland that happened, really, that killed 1 million people, and maybe more, probably more. Sicilians can talk about if you don't know the history of it, why do you think there's so many Sicilians here in the United States? Sicily is a beautiful place. If I lived in Sicily, I was born there, I'd never leave. They left there because they were brutalized to a degree. And I can't, was it Booker T. Washington? It was one of the great African American leaders went to visit. He went on a world tour and he went to Sicily. And he flat out said, there is no Black person anywhere in the United States suffering to the degree that's common here in Sicily. All right. So lots of groups have suffered. And it doesn't help to, just endlessly repeat the details of it. What don't take crap from people, obviously. Get the, earn and demand your rights and protect your rights. So good for Coleman on his primary mission in life, bad on him to be a tool of the Zionist genocidal maniacs, and bad on Rogan and whoever put the two of them together. I mean, this is a black mark on Rogan. You know, it can't be interpreted as anything else. I don't think he was in on it. I'm sure. In fact, I will say I would bet a huge sum of money he's not. But he is a reasonable guy. He models this most important thing, which is looking at all sides of an argument. Okay, but is Coleman Hughes not an honest player in this deal at all? So folks, just to understand, this is being recorded April 2024. And our good friends, just laughing, Tucker Carlson and Jon Stewart, they were all in with Israel for months. Okay. If people are watching this in the distant future and can't quite position who was who and where was where, it's April 24th, and all but the most insane and depraved people and corrupt people and ignorant people are in horror over what Israel's doing. Even Tucker Carlson and Jon Stewart, who were on board in the original weeks and months. And here's some clips of the most current stuff. So when you're looking at this video and wondering who this Coleman Hughes guy, and wondering why the heck he was on Rogan at this point of time, you realize how extreme it was for Coleman Hughes to get a hearing for his nonsense in April of 2024. So let's look at what Tucker has to say. Let's look at, well, first is Jon Stewart. They're out. They can't play the game anymore. They can't pretend that anything about this is reasonable or just or anything but a mass crime against humanity. But Coleman Hughes can, and that's because of his affiliation with the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research.
This is where Israel's actions get interesting, because you might say Israel's war is different than Ukraine's. Israel's responding to an attack and a hostage crisis. But in the midst of that, they pulled a little something in the West Bank on March 22nd that might be notable. That's not even in Gaza. That's the West Bank. So you can't say it has anything to do with defending yourself against Hamas. Let's see if America upholds its rule against taking land. Why do we tiptoe around on eggshells? They slap America in the face, and our response is, well, if anyone slapped us in the face, it'd be concerning, that's for sure. I mean, raising a hand to a delicate body part of the face, if true. The verbal gymnastics that the American government must undertake so as not to offend the delicate sensibilities of a country we provide most of the weapons for is...
And you may be asking yourself, well, wait a second. If Christian leaders won't stand up for the lives of Christians, why have them in the first place? And that's probably a good question. So you would think that in Congress, where there are many self-professed Christians, somebody might be piping up on behalf of their brethren in the Holy Land. But no, just the opposite, in fact. For example, at a town hall event last month, Michigan Congressman Tim Walberg, a former evangelical pastor, said he would like to see the region treated like Hiroshima was treated. Watch this.
We shouldn't be spending a dime on humanitarian aid. I agree. It should be like Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
To be clear, as a theological matter, Christianity is not the religion of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's the religion among all world religions that uniquely abhors mass killing. In fact, it is the religion that abhors mass killing. There's no excuse for that from a Christian perspective.
Hamas says 32,000 people have been killed, civilians and soldiers. Israel says 13,000 soldiers have been killed by Israel. So if you just let's not doubt either number. They could both be inflated. But if both of those numbers are accurate, which they may or may not be, that would be 13,000 soldiers killed, 19,000 civilians killed, which for urban combat in the Middle East is a very normal ratio.
You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Renowned chef and World Central Kitchen founder Jose Andres speaking out, claiming the IDF targeted systematically car-by-car humanitarian vehicles. This satellite photo shows the destroyed vehicle on a road designated for humanitarian aid, stretching 1.5 miles apart.
So this was not just a bad luck situation where, oops, we dropped the bomb in the wrong place, or no, this was over 1.5, 1.8 kilometers with a very defined humanitarian convoy that had signs in the top, in the roof.
Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel deeply regrets the incident. Israel's military chief added in a video statement late Tuesday that the airstrike was a grave mistake and was not carried out with the intention of harming World Central Kitchen aid workers.
All of the hospitals were depending on meals from the World Central Kitchen. There's a lot of organizations who are caring for families. And so these local organizations have taken charge of distributing meals to the people that they're responsible for. So there's a few of those, and they all depend on the WCK's daily meals. Most of the kitchens that were already there were contracted with WCK, and I hope they'll be able to still continue. But honestly, at this point, without the WCK meals a day, there's going to be even like far greater collapse.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.